Today we're going to tell you a truly unsettling story. It's one that it begins with a really desperate search for two missing children, and it just unravels into this complex, horrifying web of bizarre beliefs, tragic death, and just unimaginable deception. This deep dive starts in June of 2020 in the quiet town of Rexburg, Idaho. It was there that investigators, they began meticulously uncovering a seemingly ordinary patch of grass on a private property. They noticed it was, curiously shorter than the rest. What they found beneath that carefully concealed surface was, it's the stuff of nightmares, really. Underneath 3 large, flat rocks and then some wood panels, they discovered the plastic-wrapped body of 7-year-old Joshua J.J. Vallow. But the horror didn't end there. A second team searched a nearby area, an area the property owners actually called their pet cemetery. And there, after unearthing the remains of a cat and dog, they found a melted bucket and a partial human skull. This fragment of skull belonged to JJ's 16-year-old sister, Tylee Ryan. So this is the story of how 2 innocent children ended up in such a horrifying place. It's a narrative that takes us deep into a shocking series of events, laying bare the chilling sequence of decisions and, frankly, delusions that led to this tragedy. Get ready, because this is a story that truly makes you question everything you think you know about human belief and its darkest extremes. To understand how JJ and Tylee came to be found in such a horrifying place, we have to go back a few years. Back to the chilling transformation of their mother, Lori Vallow. Initially, Lori was known to everyone around her as, a loving mother, devoted to her children, Tylee and her adopted son, JJ. Those who knew her describe her as being very close with both of them, seemingly, a pillar of normalcy. But around the mid-2010s, something shifted. Lori's beliefs began to change dramatically. This transformation appears to have been catalyzed when she encountered the writings of an author named Chad Daybell. Now, Chad Daybell had an interesting background, somewhat unusual, you might say. He was a former gravedigger who had reinvented himself as a prolific author. And while he identified as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, his books and teachings, they leaned heavily into apocalyptic themes and his own very unique, often extreme interpretations of spirituality.
Right. And what's truly striking here, and it's a crucial insight into how these sort of cult dynamics can take hold, it's how easily a complex and seemingly outlandish belief system like Daybell's can just captivate someone. Daybell claimed to have had several past lives, to be able to converse directly with angels, even to read auras. He presented himself as this spiritual authority with exclusive knowledge. But the most terrifying insight from his teachings, the one that became absolutely central to this tragedy, was his zombie belief. And this wasn't just a delusion, it became a sinister justification mechanism. Daybell was convinced that many people on Earth weren't themselves anymore. He believed their souls had left, and their bodies were now inhabited by evil spirits. His terrifying notion, the one he imparted to his followers, was that the only way to release these spirits back to heaven was to end their physical form, essentially to kill the person. This dehumanization, framing people as mere vessels for evil, it's a classic dangerous pattern you see in many extreme groups.
And Lori, taken by his writing and perhaps already susceptible to such ideas, she chose to reach out to Daybell. Her fascination deepened, so much so that she temporarily left her home in Arizona to visit him and his small circle of followers up in Idaho. Now, the extent of Lori's pre-existing delusions before meeting Chad Daybell isn't entirely clear, but regardless, connecting with this self-proclaimed prophet seemed to have an incredibly potent and ultimately destructive effect on her beliefs. The pair began recording religious podcasts together, basically broadcasting their increasingly radical ideologies. And in those recordings, Lori would boldly declare herself to be a supernatural being. She claimed she had been chosen by God to, and this is a quote, lead the 144,000 chosen into the millennium. You can imagine the alarm this raised. Her husband at the time, Charles Vallow, was rightfully concerned, profoundly worried, actually, about his wife's apparent descent into what he saw as madness. But from Lori's twisted perspective, Charles's concern wasn't a sign of love or worry. No, it was taken as undeniable evidence that he was the enemy. A former family friend, April Raymond, later explained that Lori believed part of her divine mission on Earth was to eliminate the darkness, the demonic, the evil. And the way she rationalized Charles's presence and his opposition to her new beliefs was chillingly casual. She claimed he was already dead and that there was a demon living inside him.
The dehumanizing process.
Exactly, and it extended to her own family. By the spring of 2019, Lori had started referring to her own daughter, Tylee, as a zombie. She'd come to believe that the young girl was possessed by a dark spirit. It was a horrifying label, wasn't it? Really setting the stage for unspeakable acts. So, as Lori's bizarre and dangerous beliefs escalated, Charles Vallow's concern grew from worry to just outright desperation. By the summer of 2019, he had gone to the police not once, but twice. He expressed his grave concerns about his wife's rapidly deteriorating mental state and the persistent, chilling threats she was making on his life. We even have a chilling soundbite from one of his 911 calls from that time. It really captures his raw fear and confusion. Let's play that. Audio simulation. She's lost her mind. She thinks she's a resurrected being and a god. Threaten me, murder me, kill me. She threatened to murder you, yes. And she said, how did she do that? My bishop right there is in the car. He was on the phone with me today, which she said, I will have you destroyed. You're not Charles. I don't know who you are, what you did with Charles, but I can murder you now with my powers. Charles Vallow, clearly terrified, seeing the writing on the wall, he took some grim precautions. He tragically changed the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy from Lori to his sister, Kaye. Kaye was also JJ's biological grandmother, it's important to note. He also filed for divorce, seeking joint custody of JJ, just desperately trying to gain legal protection for his son and, well, remove him from Lori's increasingly volatile influence.
And this tragic oversight, it really highlights a critical societal challenge, doesn't it? How do our systems, particularly law enforcement, respond when explicit threats are couched within these, bizarre cult-like narratives? Charles Vallow's alarming claims describing his wife's specific delusions and direct threats to murder him were unfortunately not treated with the severity they deserved at that moment. It underscores a systemic blind spot when faced with unconventional dangers. Sometimes the sheer strangeness of the narrative can overshadow the very real threat it conveys. It's a reminder that a threat, no matter how bizarre the context, is still a threat.
And tragically, the threats became reality. On the morning of July 11, 2019, Charles arrived at Lori's new rental home. He was there to pick up the children for school. Upon arrival, he discovered that Lori's fiercely protective brother, Alex Cox, was also present. Just a few minutes later, a frantic 911 call reported a shooting. When police arrived, Alex Cox was found on the curb, nursing what appeared to be a pretty minor head wound. He told police this dramatic story. Charles Vallow, he claimed, had been getting physical with Lori during an argument. He said Tylee had retrieved a bat from her room to defend her mom, but Charles took the bat from her and proceeded to hit Alex over the head. At that point, Alex said he went to his room, got his gun, and shot Charles Vallow dead. Self-defense, he claimed. According to those present, both children were outside when the shooting took place. And in police interviews after the fact, the children even relayed stories similar to Alex's, supporting that idea of self-defense. However, a responding officer, interviewed later, described Lori as appearing disturbingly nonchalant after her husband's death.
Unusually calm?
Exactly. The officer also expressed significant skepticism about Alex Cox's head wound, stating it definitely didn't appear that he was struck with an extreme amount of force with a baseball bat, especially given Charles was a very physically fit man, a former college baseball player.
Right, you expect more significant injury.
Definitely. But perhaps the most shocking detail to emerge, one that still sends shivers, was that according to neighbors. Lori Vallow threw a pool party later that same day, just imagine that. The sheer coldness, the unimaginable casualness, just hours after her husband was shot dead on her property. And the deceptions continued, just unabated. Lori would later lie about the shooting to staff at JJ's school, claiming her estranged husband had taken his own life. Right. Then, a month or so later, she lied again, telling them the family was moving to California, which meant JJ would have to be removed from their institution. These lies, as we'll soon see, were just the beginning of a much larger pattern of obfuscation. But in truth, on September 1st of 2019, Lori, Tylee, and JJ moved to an apartment complex in Rexburg, Idaho, not far from where Chad Daybell lived with his wife, Tammy. And Lori's brother, Alex Cox, ever present in her life, he also moved into the same apartment complex, September 8th, just a week after the move. This is now believed to be the last day of Tylee Ryan's life. Tylee spent much of her final day in Yellowstone National Park with her mom, her brother, and her uncle Alex. This was confirmed by a picture taken at the park, later found on Alex's phone. Sometime after the children's disappearance gained national attention, investigators used location data from that same cell phone. They painstakingly tracked Alex's movements, and it actually helped them paint a chillingly clear picture of what likely took place. Here's the grim timeline they established. September 8th, 6:45 p.m., the family leaves Yellowstone. Alex returns to his apartment. Then, September 9th, 2:45 a.m., very early morning, Alex is in Lori's apartment. He stays there for a few hours before returning to his own unit. Later that same morning, September 9th, at 9:00 a.m., Alex arrives at Chad Daybell's home. He's there for more than 2 hours. And records indicate that immediately after Alex left, Chad sent a peculiar message to his wife, Tammy.
Yeah, if we connect this to the broader pattern of events and, Chad Daybell's beliefs, Alex Cox being present at Chad Daybell's property for over 2 hours. So shortly after Tylee Ryan was last seen alive, It creates a very strong and tragic implication. It really points to this as the probable time and location of Tylee's burial, orchestrated by individuals convinced they were serving some higher purpose by releasing a dark spirit. And the swift communication between Alex and Chad right afterward just further solidifies this disturbing connection.
So with that chilling picture of Tylee's final moments emerging, investigators then turn their focus to JJ. And the story of JJ's last known day is equally unsettling. It was September 22nd, 2019. Sometime between 9 p.m. and midnight, Alex Cox was seen carrying a sleeping JJ into Lori's apartment. This was witnessed by a couple of Lori's associates who were there recording one of those religious podcasts with her at the time. One of those associates, David Warwick, he later explained to the press the utterly bizarre justification Lori gave for Alex taking to JJ. Lori claimed that JJ was being a zombie. She said he climbed up top of the fridge, smashed her picture of Christ down, and then climbed up onto the upper cabinets and got between the top cabinet and the ceiling. This, she implied, was a sign of a dark spirit possessing him. Unbelievable. The very next day, September 23rd, 9:55 a.m., Alex Cox went to the Daybell's backyard again, but this time his visit was much shorter. He was only there for about 17 minutes.
That significantly shorter time frame for this second visit, compared to Alex's 2-hour stay around Tylee's disappearance. It strongly suggests that Chad Daybell, who, let's not forget, was a former professional gravedigger, was probably heavily involved in this second burial. Possibly both of them, really. His expertise would have streamlined the process, right? It implies the site was either prepared in advance or that he took the lead in the swift interment. It really raises the disturbing question of the extent of his direct physical involvement in these children's deaths and burials.
Initially, no one really noticed that the two children had gone missing. This was, of course, largely because Lori made no reports to authorities and was actively misleading anyone who inquired. A month went by without them around, and that's when this case took another bizarre and frankly deeply suspicious turn. On October 19th of 2019, Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy, was found to have died in her sleep. Now, while initially no foul play was suspected, the timing in hindsight becomes deeply suspicious. It raises immediate questions about this seemingly convenient death, given everything else unfolding.
Extremely convenient, yes.
This tragic loss didn't seem to deter Chad Daybell in the slightest. In a truly astonishing and unsettling development, just a couple of weeks later, he ran off with Lori to Hawaii to elope. Looking at their wedding photos, you see them full of smiles, seemingly carefree joy. You'd never expect these people to have just lost their respective spouses, and even more disturbingly, not know where their own children were.
It's jarring.
It really is. The stark contrast between their apparent bliss and the reality of the situation was jarring to anyone who later learned the full story. Another month later, in November 2019, authorities would finally come knocking, actively looking for JJ. They were alerted by Kaye, Charles Vallow's sister, and JJ's biological grandmother. She told them she'd been trying to reach her grandchild for several weeks, couldn't get through. Lori would just give her bogus excuses every time she called. During this initial interaction with the police, Lori, now known as Lori Daybell, tried to play the victim. She attempted to turn suspicion towards Kaye. She claimed, incredibly, "My husband switched his life insurance policy to his sister who got $1 million when he died, and we got nothing for me to raise JJ." She also falsely claimed that Tylee had simply gone away for college, a fabrication that, could have been easily debunked with a simple phone call. As the pressure mounted, Lori escalated her deception. She lied to police. She even attempted to use her friend Melanie Gibb as a shield, trying to get her to claim that JJ was in her care. Lori specifically asked Melanie to, and this is another quote, "pick up my phone and take a random picture of kids running around to make it look like it was JJ." Eventually, Gibb, sensing something was profoundly wrong, deeply uncomfortable with the lies. She wanted to know why Lori was telling the police JJ was with her when that was absolutely not true. So she decided to call Lori and Chad while secretly recording their conversation. It was during this call that Lori, seemingly cornered, admitted that JJ was in danger of being kidnapped by his grandmother, Kaye, and that she didn't want to give this information to police in case they sided with Kaye. This recording, unbeknownst to Lori at the time, would become a pivotal piece of evidence.
Absolutely crucial. That recording became direct, irrefutable proof that Lori was deliberately lying to police about JJ's whereabouts and safety. From that moment, Lori herself was put directly under a microscope by law enforcement. It really was a decisive turning point in the investigation. It shifted the focus from a simple missing persons case to one of suspected foul play, directly involving Lori and Chad. It showed a clear pattern of calculated deception.
Yeah, and as this critical recording emerged in the background, the case of the missing Vallow children just exploded onto the national stage. Headlines everywhere. Many people across the country were perplexed, horrified by this mother who seemed, well, not to even care that her children were missing. Law enforcement publicly expressed their frustrations, claiming Lori would outright refuse to cooperate with them, all while she was back in Hawaii, seemingly enjoying her life with her new husband, Chad. As this deeply unsettling case spread, people started digging into Lori and Chad's past. The bizarre nature of their shared beliefs came to light. And of course, this led to a widespread agreement among observers that something truly horrible must have happened to the children. And as we now know, they were unfortunately correct. At the tail end of 2019, several other significant developments occurred. Tammy Daybell's body, Chad's first wife, was exhumed.
Right, for re-examination due to the new suspicions surrounding the couple.
Exactly, though the specific results weren't immediately public at the time. Then, on December 12th, Alex Cox, Lori's brother, the man who shot Charles Vallow, he was found by his stepson vomiting and gasping for air on the bathroom floor. He was pronounced dead of natural causes shortly thereafter. His wife of just 2 weeks explained he'd been suffering from shortness of breath for about a week prior, felt winded before collapsing, but strangely had refused to go to the hospital on the day he was found. It's also alleged that on the very day he died, Alex called Chad Daybell and received a priesthood blessing over the phone.
A spiritual healing or comfort ritual, yeah.
The timing of Alex's death, given his central role in this whole narrative, was, to say the least, incredibly convenient for the remaining individuals.
Extremely convenient, yes.
Yeah.
Almost too convenient.
By January of 2020, authorities had really had enough of Lori and Chad's evasions. They issued a court order demanding Lori produce her children within 5 days. This, of course, didn't happen. So Lori's vacation in Hawaii was cut short. She was arrested by Kauai police on charges of child abandonment and soon extradited back to Idaho. Chad, meanwhile, returned home to a life that was just rapidly unraveling. This was huge news, obviously, to anyone following the case at the time, but much to everyone's disappointment, it still didn't result in the children's safe return. In fact, Lori still wasn't talking. Neither was Chad Daybell. But the pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. Shortly after Chad's arrest, on June 9, 2020, the bodies of both JJ and Tylee were finally unearthed on his property, confirming the worst fears of so many following the case, bringing a tragic, horrifying end to that desperate search. Following the discovery and the ongoing investigation, both Lori and Chad Daybell pleaded not guilty to an array of disturbing charges. Everything from desertion all the way to conspiracy and destruction, concealment of the children's bodies.
Which raises that important question, the one on everyone's mind. What about murder charges? Well, the prosecution has expressed a clear intent to pursue murder charges against the couple. Those specific charges hadn't formally happened when the source material for this dive was created. What's also particularly insightful here, potentially, is how Alex Cox's death might become a key factor in the defense strategy. It's entirely possible Alex Cox was indeed the one who carried out the murders of Tylee and JJ. And given that he isn't alive to face consequences or testify, well, that could unfortunately make him an ideal scapegoat for the defense to utilize, especially for Lori, allowing them to shift blame away from her. Chad, on the other hand, still could be facing additional legal trouble since he's also now suspected of murdering his first wife, Tammy, with her death being reinvestigated in light of all these discoveries.
This case is still ongoing. There are many disturbing details yet to be fully uncovered, complex legal processes still to unfold. This story is just such a chilling reminder of how easily beliefs, no matter how pure their origin might seem, can be twisted, and how devastating the consequences can be when an individual fully commits to an extreme ideology that justifies heinous acts. It's a narrative just filled with layers of deception, unimaginable tragedy, and so many lingering unanswered questions that continue to haunt those who follow it. As you reflect on this profoundly disturbing story, maybe consider how quickly the perception of reality can unravel when an individual fully commits to an extreme ideology, and how that commitment can lead to the ultimate betrayal of those they are meant to protect. What stands out to you most about this complex and disturbing sequence of events? We hope this deep dive has been as informative as it has been gripping for you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for listening.
Until next time, take care.